Yesterday was such an interesting day. It got so hot, and then it got cold because of the rain, and then it got really hot, and it's raining again today. So I'm enjoying the coolness while I can. That's why I've got a shirt on instead of being topless. Anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk to you about the major change that has happened, at least in America, and I know in some other countries as well. But I'll focus on America because that's what I know the best. The major change in the family structure. So when I was a little boy, divorce was extremely rare. It was frowned on, and there were a lot of families with unhappy marriages and abuse and stuff like that. But people wouldn't get divorced even though that was occurring. And then as I got older, divorce became more and more normal and accepted. And then probably around by the 1980s, it was like, oh, you're getting divorced? Oh, okay, good for you, kind of an attitude. Now, I'm not criticizing people who stay together in an abusive relationship or people who divorce because of an abusive relationship. I'm not criticizing anybody at all about any of that. That's, the truth is let me just take this in two parts. The first part is about love, and the second part is what I really want to focus on, and that is the family unit. So, love is, well, it's very romanticized and presented in often in idealized ways that don't really teach us about what really it means to be in love. So in this video, I just want to explain briefly, there are different kinds of love. And you can have love between friends, you can have love between siblings, love between children and parents, children and grandparents, children and other relatives, love between children and teachers, and love between adults as well. It doesn't have to just be children and so on. It can be, love between adult friends and adult family members and neighbors and whatever. And it can be platonic love, it can be romantic love, it can be lustful love. But ultimately, there are two things about love that people generally don't like to admit. And the first is that love is not eternal. And the second thing is that love is chemical. And I know some of you are going to be like, what? You're crazy. Shut up. And I'm going to be like, no, I'm not going to shut up because I'm speaking the truth. So if you look into the brain and the way the brain works when you meet somebody that you're interested in, there are a whole bunch of things that are going on. But basically, your brain reacts to people on different levels. So it'll react to somebody on a physical level, it'll react on an intellectual level, it'll react on a pheromonal level, it'll react on a sexual level. One or all of these things can happen, and what the reaction is determines what you feel. So you may meet somebody who's very repulsive looking, and so you have a very negative reaction unless you have taught yourself that just because somebody's ugly doesn't mean they're a bad person, which is true. Looks do not determine somebody's personality. But we have a biological tendency, and this is because we subconsciously look for traits that indicate a possible disease and stuff like that. So we tend to avoid people who look ill or look malformed. People who have physical differences that our brain says, oh, that's not somebody you want to have a baby with. And there are reasons for that, and it's basically about, survival of the species, evolution, and all that stuff. People, at some point in the past, that was the primary driver. You would look for somebody who was healthy, if you could. And, of course, there were the people who couldn't because they didn't look healthy, they didn't look good, so they had to settle for the other people who didn't look healthy and good. But primarily we are driven to look for people who look healthy. But ultimately, what happens is if you meet somebody and your brain says, "Ooh, I like this person," what's going to happen is your brain is going to produce chemicals that are going to cause you to have a good feeling around that person. And you can call it butterflies in the stomach. You can say it's giddiness. You can call it whatever you want to. You can say it's love. But the real thing that you're experiencing is created by a chemical cocktail produced by your brain. So, you can think about the illegal drug ecstasy, and that basically is trying to stimulate a specific kind of chemical reaction that's more of a lustful one. But basically that's what happens. So when you're feeling love, you're feeling chemicals released in your brain, by your brain, to stimulate you to be interested in that person. And so really, it's not emotional, it's not intellectual, it is something deeper than that. It's something more automatic, more primitive perhaps than that, and that's what you feel. Now here's where it gets tricky, because we feel that and we are like, oh, this is going to last forever, I'm going to love you forever, this is wonderful, I'm so happy with you. And the truth is, and I hate to break it to you, but the truth is it just, for most people, it does not last. Now, why it doesn't last, there are different reasons. One reason can be that the person who you have this initial reaction to doesn't turn out to be somebody you actually feel compatible with, and your feelings will change because the chemical, your body will, your brain, I should say, will eventually say, well, not a good mate. Turn off those hormones, like dopamine and serotonin and stuff. And it may happen very rapidly. I mean, you may talk to that person in the first 5 minutes. You may become disgusted with that person and not want to have anything to do with that person. It may be days, weeks, months, or even years before your body stops, or your brain stops producing those chemicals that make you feel in love. And it may be on and off too. I mean, you may be with somebody who's abusive and he's horrible, or she, because there are female abusers out there as well. This person may be horrible to you and beat you horribly, and then the next day they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it, I don't know what happened, I'll never do it again, I love you so much, and they'll treat you like you are the most important person in the world. So you'll go from this incredibly low, torturous position, literally torturous, where you have been physically and emotionally abused, to this high of, oh, you're like a god or a goddess, you're like way up here, and that will trigger your brain to produce the hormones that induce that feeling of love again. So your brain is actually screwing up and not saving you from an abusive relationship when that's what it's supposed to do, because your partner is manipulating your brain. Whether your partner knows it or not, whether it's deliberate or accidental, your partner is manipulating your brain into making you feel love for somebody who's hurting you. That's pretty scary. And that's part of the reason why people who are in abusive relationships with a partner who does that have so much trouble leaving. So, this is love. Love is not eternal. Love is transitory. And when you get to the point where you don't have that hormone production happening anymore, well, you have different choices. You can either tough it out and see if you guys can, the two of you can work together to try to rekindle that drug production in your brains, or you can start cheating, or you can leave each other. Sometimes leaving is the best choice, because sometimes once the drugs stop being produced, it starts to get ugly. And it may take a little while, it may take a long time, but it starts to get ugly, and the longer you try to force it when it's not working anymore, the worse it gets. And especially if you don't have somebody who's a really, really skilled counselor to help you work through the differences and rekindle your feelings, because Often we forget why we're together. We forget what we felt and when we first met that person and why. And honestly, if you fall in love with somebody and you can't actually explain why you love that person, that's bad. That is a bad, bad sign. Never ever get into a committed relationship with somebody if you cannot articulate, which is to say you cannot explain in detail why you love that person. So if somebody says, "Why do you love that person?" Well, I just I do. He's wonderful. He's just the best person in the whole world, and that's sorry. That's not, you're not articulating specific reasons. You need to be able to say more. Oh, he's great. More than that. More than he's handsome. More than he's sexy. More than she's intellectually brilliant. You have to be able to find specific reasons why. Because otherwise, your whole relationship is pinned on those chemicals. And once the chemical production stops, there's nothing holding the relationship together. And that's when the real challenges start, because the two of you have to figure out, well, we really don't have much in common, don't really know why we just chose to be together, but we're together now. I guess we're going to have to figure that out. So this is my first video, and this is what I'm trying to get you to understand. Love is not a permanent thing. Yes, I know that in religions often we are taught to be monogamous, but biologically, psychologically, many people are not geared to having a long-term relationship, much less being monogamous. Now, I was monogamous for the 14 years I was with my wife before she died. But you may be able to do that too. I don't know if she was monogamous or not, but I was. But you may not be able to do that. You may find yourself cheating. There's a whole range of possibilities, the polygamy and polyandry and all this other stuff. But basically, if you set aside the construct of an eternal love relationship and look at the reality of the way our brains work and how hormones impact us pretty much all of our lives. I would say, pretty much from birth or even before birth until the end of your life, for most people, you are being manipulated or controlled or whatever word you want to use by hormones. In some situations, not all. So if you get into a committed relationship and then eventually you fall out of love, you have to work with your partner and be honest with each other and figure out what it's going to take. And it may not be possible. Don't shrug off the idea of going to a counselor to try and make things work. And don't shrug off the possibility that you may not be compatible long term. But if you're going to get into a love relationship, before you have kids, you have to be realistic and you have to consider, what are you going to do if that situation arises? And it does arise for many people. I know this is probably disturbing for some of you, that you may end up in a platonic long-term relationship. But there are ways to be in a long-term relationship without that hormonally induced feeling of love. And you just have to find the way that works for you and your partner without going down the rabbit hole, without descending into madness, without descending into abuse, without descending into addiction. And that's where the challenge really lies. Because once the honeymoon phase is over and your brain says, you know what? Nah, not anymore. That's when the real work starts. Marriage is not easy. A long-term relationship is not easy. Even if you have those feelings of love, it's not easy because you have to learn to work together. You have to learn to be compatible with each other. You have to learn to accommodate each other and help each other and support each other and tolerate each other, even when maybe your partner farts a lot. And I feel sorry for my wife. She put up with my farts, and they happened at the most inopportune moments. And it turned out all that time I was lactose intolerant and didn't know it. It sucked, but that was part of the downside of her being married to me, and I had downsides being married to her. So I hope this helps you and prepares you for the possibility of long-term relationships that aren't so long, and the possibility that you may have to move on. Sorry. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.